Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first.
This appears to be a year that's going to be pretty tough. The president and Congress have battled it out over the Iranian nuclear arms deal, while Bibi Netanyahu wins re-election in Israel. And here at home, politics have been dominated by Hillary Clinton's emails and the question, who will run against Hillary? Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Tackle this and a lot more. Our in-studio guest is Salisbury University political science professor Michael Laughlin. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Well, let's turn to presidential politics for a moment. We've had all this kerfuffle about the emails, Hillary Clinton at the State Department. What do you make of that issue? And is it something that lasts? Is it something that plays into, say, for instance, a narrative for the Clintons? What you're reading?
I think unless something turns up of real substance, whether there's a true scandal involved here, my guess would be that it is a fleeting issue on its own merits. However, I think it does play into a larger campaign strategy, certainly from the Republican side, to attack the character of Hillary Clinton. In other words, to question her judgment. I mean, I think again and again this is the part of the subtext here is that she made bad decisions here, regardless of whether there's anything scandalous. It was a bad judgment call, and this reflects upon her ability to be president. And that will be, I think, a campaign issue that will come up again. Again, it's tied to the whole effort to question her judgment on Benghazi, et cetera. So we haven't heard the last of it, and I think we can look forward, if I can say that in terms of campaign strategy, to further attempts to undermine her character.
One of the things that struck me about this is that there's a phrase about, oh, here we go again with the Clintons, right, because the scandals. But it seems to me in some ways that this kind of attack on a particular issue, particularly from Republicans, it hasn't gone away since the mid-1990s. That certainly we had it with Bill Clinton, with Whitewater and so on, and then we ran through it with President Obama as well, with all kinds of crazy things that make now the Clinton era look almost sane by comparison. Is this really reflective as we see people jump onto this and Congress investigate it, because they're talking about maybe even bringing her in front of the Congress, perhaps during an election year, who knows? Just part of a longer narrative that we've seen playing out from the Gingrich era of 94 and to here. I mean, it wouldn't make any difference whether it's Hillary Clinton or somebody else that's elected to the White House if it's a Democrat.
I think so, and part of the reason it has to do with the demographic shift, I think, that's taking place, which as it is unfolding, will benefit any Democratic candidate who runs for president. So the Republican strategy, simply from a strategic point of view, in order to try to counter the demographic shift, again, with a majority-minority electorate emerging in our near future, in order to try to counter that, there is a need to try to undermine the character of the candidate. So whether it's Hillary Clinton or Martin O'Malley, I think that will have to be part of the strategy from the Republican side, because they will be coming up with a disadvantage in terms of the demographic shift.
Now, as a matter of fact, there's one of the questions that's been raised, which is who will run against Hillary in terms of the Democratic presidential primary, if any. There are a number of people have been talked about, but one, of course, is the former governor here, Martin O'Malley. What do you make of him? I did a little surfing, and technocrat comes to mind.
Yes.
How do you think he plays? And obviously, if there's a Hillary juggernaut, it may be very well over. But nonetheless, what do you make of him as a candidate?
I think he's an effective campaigner. Again, he won 2 terms as governor. He knocked out Ehrlich after 1 term. So I think he is a technocrat. I think he fashions himself a data-driven a policymaker. I think he would run to the left of Hillary Clinton. He's popular with labor unions, and I think he's brandishing that kind of position for himself. So he's positioning himself, I think, if indeed he does run, he's positioning himself somewhat to the left of Hillary Clinton, and would be trying to wage a challenge there. Having said that, Clinton clearly, I think, is the odds-on favorite. O'Malley only has a chance, I think, if Clinton were to stumble seriously. And I think any of the other candidates who might come into this, that's really what they're in there for, to the extent they want to try to get that top position. The other, of course, is that if O'Malley, even if he doesn't get the nomination, if he runs well and shows that he can mobilize, particularly workers and labor union members, the vice presidential spot could be part of his goal as well.
Because, I mean, obviously, he's talked about, in terms of O'Malley, he's raised issues like reinstating, for instance, the Glass-Steagall banking regulations, increasing the capital gains tax, increasing minimum wage, and so on. Do you think that by raising those issues in a campaign, what do you think that's going to do in terms of Hillary Clinton, who, at least for the moment, fairly or unfairly, has been associated a lot more with Wall Street and that kind of thing, even though she's certainly talked about raising the minimum wage and certainly a lot of the progressive issues that satisfy the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. But there still seems to be some angst about her on the left of the Democratic Party.
No question. I think there is a significant populist and liberal wing of the Democratic Party that really is uneasy with Clinton, and certainly I think would give some support to an O'Malley challenge or Elizabeth Warren challenge, to be sure. If you look, in fact, the issues that you just mentioned are really all the Warren issues as well. So O'Malley and Warren are really lining up those particular issues that appeal to the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. The test will be, of course, is once we get closer into the fall, really next fall, actually, prior to the primaries, how these issues are playing with the Democratic constituency. If they are playing well and clear that the numbers are going up for O'Malley, let's say, then Clinton will have to begin to move leftward. She'll have to then try to pick up if there is a significant challenge. If there is no significant challenge, well, then Clinton can hold back on those until the general election.
I'm reminded, before we leave, that actually O'Malley has his quote saying that triangulation is not a strategy that will move America forward. Triangulation, of course, was probably the key to Clinton's husband's success, Bill Clinton. We'll see how that works out. But before we leave this, one of the things that's happened, of course, is that Senator Barbara Mikulski has decided she's going to step down and retire. Of course, that has sent everybody scrambling as well. But before we get to her replacement already, what do you make of her legacy? I mean, I know there's a Lilly Ledbetter Act. I know she was very active, but she seemed to galvanize in many ways a lot of the congressional women, both Republican and Democrat, on the Hill.
Her legacy, I think, is strongest in terms of women's issues, and I think in terms of labor and a strong liberal record with regard to domestic policies. Less so, I think, in terms of foreign policy. I think for foreign policy, she tended to tack towards more conservative, some major ways hawkish position, I think, in terms of foreign policy. But I think she'll be most remembered for her support, certainly becoming senator, a female senator, sort of making setting a precedent for that, I think, in Maryland politics, which may or may not be repeated in the near future.
Because I know, as a matter of fact, I mean, I guess reminded to looking at it, she was first, I guess, elected to the House in 1977, and then she was elected to the Senate in 1986. I think she's the longest-serving woman, actually, I think, in Congress in both.
I believe that's right. Yes.
So who replaces her?
Well, this is first of all, of course, I think it is a Democratic seat to be won. It's difficult to see any real Republican challenger. So it really has to do with what's happening within the Democratic Party here. And here there is a scramble, and I think some interesting developments. I think Chris Van Hollen is probably the most high-profile politician, congressman in Maryland who is clearly throwing his hat in the ring. And if one were to place bets, my guess would be that most of those of the Democratic elites will rally around his candidacy. However, a major challenger, I think, is Ms. Donna Edwards, who is a very liberal firebrand, I think, coming out of the African American community. And the challenge, really, if she can mobilize sufficient support, would be if the African American community really rallies around her. So that the standoff could be, or the real challenge in the Democratic primary could be between someone like Van Hollen on the one hand and Donna Edwards on the other. The difficulty, I think, for Edwards is she's young. Doesn't have a long track record yet in the Congress, in the House, whereas Van Hollen has a long. He's one of the leaders,
right,
part of the leadership, and so the weight of support probably, it seems, would fall to him.
Because, as a matter of fact, I was reading, I think, Emily's List, which supports women candidates on the Democratic side particularly. Apparently they are contributing to Donna Edwards' campaign. So it looks as if we might get some kind of matchup there. On the Republican side, a couple of names bouncing about, of course, is Bob Ehrlich, but also our own Andy Harris. I don't know whether he wants to leave a safe Republican seat, which is what it seems to be, at least this moment. How do you gauge whether or not some big name Republicans will get in, or will we see some minor players instead, as we've seen oftentimes in the past against Mikulski?
Again, in a two-party system, even if the odds are still against you winning, it's still two parties.
That's right.
so that while I can say on the one hand it seems like a safe seat for the Democrats, we thought it was a safe seat for the Democrats this past fall with the governor's race. Yes,
right.
So Ehrlich and Andy Harris, they can look at the numbers and say, well, why not give it a shot? It's an open seat. I mean, it's not running against an incumbent. So the fact that it's an open seat means that there are greater possibilities than there would be with an incumbent. So I would guess that there will be some more prominent names, and Ehrlich, again, has probably, of the Republicans in Maryland, has the best shot perhaps of any. I'm not quite sure what Andy Harris thinks about his prospects, because he's has a safe seat here in the 1st District. I don't think his profile is all that high within Maryland. However, perhaps within the Republican Party, perhaps there is a chance for him.
What about Ehrlich? He lost twice, I guess.
I know he lost twice, and one wonders if he might want to consider what Mitt Romney decided finally, that how many times do you want to go down and lose? However, again, again, I think go back to the basic proposition that an open seat is a chance, and this is a Senate seat, so it's a position where people really would like to get in there, because once you get in, the incumbency takes you forward.
Before we leave politics, one thing that has struck me, particularly over the last few days, in terms of state politics, we've had Governor Larry Hogan, who was this upset Republican, some question about how he would get along. There was some negative reaction, by the way, to his State of the State, as well as some of his budget ideas. Some of that, however, seems to be coming along. We're now hearing out of Annapolis that they've been able to hammer out a compromise on the budget with Republican support. We might actually get a deal now now on the phosphorus regulations. So there seems to be something inching along here. Even the stormwater fees, that seems like they might have a compromise. That seems to stand in contrast to kind of the local fights that are going on here, particularly in Wicomico County, where you have a Republican who is the county executive, Bob Culver, and immediately he became at odds with a majority Republican county council. Seems to stand in contrast. What do you see going on? Because I would have associated Hogan with much more conservative end of the Republican Party. I don't know whether Tea Party was quite the right way to do it. How do you see that mix now happening in terms of the Republican Party here in the state?
The context is critical here. Hogan, interestingly, it seems, is operating true to his promise at this point, at least, and that is, he understands that he's working within a democratic state, and that his prospects for a second term will depend mightily on how well he is able to cooperate with the Democratic legislature. And I think so that it strikes me that is part of the explanation, so that he doesn't have to worry. I mean, I think his judgment has to be that he doesn't have to worry about future challenges within the Republican Party itself. They are quite happy to have him as governor, right? That he did what no one else could do, it seemed, within the Republican Party. And perhaps by temperament as well. He doesn't seem to be a fiery kind of politician. He's pretty much a businessman who is, wants to pursue certain deals here and not betraying all of his principles, but again, compromising where he can with the Democrats. And so I think that's perhaps going to be playing out. That's the way it's going to play out for the next couple of years. Whereas locally, I think the context is quite different. I think the Republicans here are giddy with victory, believing that as far as the eye can see, there's not going to be much of a challenge from Democrats. Hence, the squabbling, infighting, and squabbling can take place. I mean, when without detriment to their future political prospects. At least that's what it seems at present.
Turn to international events. We had obviously the re-election of Benjamin Netanyahu, and fairly decisively. Actually, I mean, his party actually gained some serious seats, was the top vote getter in terms of the seats in parliament. What do you make of that election outcome, particularly for U.S.-Israeli relations? Because we have this comment by Netanyahu, on the one hand, that early before the election he didn't see a two-state solution during his tenure. Now he's saying, well, no, it's the conditions have to be right. What's going on there?
I think that the election, both his election and what the Israeli electorate did in response to essentially at the end of the campaign, a racist campaign where he warned them that the Arabs were coming. In effect, but it really is an affirmation of a rejectionist policy position from Israel, and that is that no two-state solution, no binational solution where there's equality for Palestinian Arabs within the larger state of Israel, and instead a continuation or pursuit of an integration of the West Bank into Israel. I mean, that's in effect what Netanyahu has really done in the past. This whole notion of the peace process was simply a mechanism for continuing settlement, expansion of settlements, with Jerusalem being simply an Israeli capital. So in this respect, there's no real surprise here, except that it's become clearer. And with regard to the United States, this undermines the whole legitimacy of the United States position, which has been, yes, we want to have a peace process. We're working for a two-state solution. And here the Israeli prime minister says, well, I throw that out the window. Okay, and then after the election, he says, I'm just kidding. Well, there's no credibility, absolutely no credibility with him. So what has happened? I mean, so words do matter, as Josh Earnest said. And I think what we may see here is that There's no direct Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, but really the push for international pressure on Israel.
Let me ask you this, because one of the things, because when Netanyahu, and we heard it this morning, when Netanyahu looks out at the world, he sees obviously the dominance of Hamas in Gaza. So that's this, and he raises the issue about can that happen in the West Bank, but then something else has also happened, which is that this schism that's occurred within the Islamic world between Shiites and Sunnis has led to some groups that carry out terrorist activities, and obviously the rise of ISIS. So he sees a region in flux, and what the sense I get is, no matter how he got here, there's even probably a greater hesitancy to move forward with anything too solid, because he sees all these influences. He's trying to figure out, and the Israeli people, for that matter, not just place it on his shoulders. Israeli people are trying to figure out, what does this new world look like for them, and how does that affect what he could be a peace process? That is, and the world has changed. I mean, one cannot deny that.
Well,
or do you think? I mean,
yes, but if you look at the history, Hamas ultimately is the creation of Israel. The Israeli policy over the past 30, 40 years essentially drove out the democratic secularists in the Palestinian movement, so that the world that Israel faces is a world that Israel has helped mightily to shape.
You think by effect or by design?
Both. Netanyahu's position is strengthened by being able to say, we're threatened by the Islamic State. There's complete chaos. There's confusion out there. Who could negotiate under these kinds of conditions? We have to wait until all that is settled. Well, the advantage of the expansionist policy of Israel is that the chaos, so long as the chaos is out there, the expansion can continue, and integration of the West Bank into Greater Israel can be a fait accompli in a few more years. If you look at what's happening to the Palestinian communities, it really is apartheid, and they're isolated communities. So the idea of having an integrated state is becoming less viable because of what Israeli policy has pursued. The other piece to keep in mind is the Israeli military is unchallenged really in the region, and the idea that they could not secure borders of a demilitarized Palestinian state and protect its own borders against the Islamic State or whatever else is going on within the other countries, in Syria particularly, really is not particularly credible. Moreover, and this is where the international position is clear, that if you could reach indeed an accommodationist compromise, a solution for the Palestine question, right? That would calm much of what feeds the anger and animosity towards Israel.
Although you've got that Hamas element that Israel does not seem to willing to come to grips with, and Hamas really hasn't necessarily come to grips with Israel, and that's Netanyahu's one of the major objection is that the leaders in the West Bank are not yet willing to let go of that. I mean, it seems to be the sand,
Yes, yeah. But I think it's a red herring ultimately. There's no question that Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are recognizing the reality of Israel. This whole notion of states recognizing the right of other states to exist. Who does that? It's not in international law. It's not in the protocols of state relationships one to the other. So that I think has been a red herring for a long time, and it really functions to simply allow Israel to continue to annex the rest of the West Bank.
Let me just real briefly on about the last 30, 40 seconds here. What do you make of the Iranian arms deal? We obviously had Netanyahu come here and speak out against it. sounds like it could be close. Sometimes it's far away. What do you think?
From all indications, there's a good prospect, I think, for a deal to be made. It's certainly in the interest of Iran, and it's certainly in the interest of the United States to try to calm the waters, the nuclear waters, I think, in the Middle East. Iran has a long future in the Middle East. They can always, at some later point, if things broke down, to pursue a nuclear program. But right now, it may be in their prudent interest to get the sanctions off their back to get a deal.
It seems, of course, that their influence also seems to be expanding in some fashion or another, with not only with ISIS, but also in conflict with ISIS, supporting the Iraqi government, but also we have this situation in Syria. Obviously, we have the situation in Gaza. I mean, there seems to be they have a very deep interest. We've been talking with Michael Laughlin. He's a political science professor at Salisbury University. Appreciate you stopping by.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast in iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, visit the Daily Times or visit pac14.org.